Hello YouTube, my name is Zach, and today I'm going to be bringing you another video analysis of a singer. You guys seem to really respond to that well last week, so I want to keep it up. I want to keep you guys interested and give you some stuff that you all enjoy. And so today I'm going to be bringing you one of my favorite singers, Daniel Gildenlöw of Pain of Salvation. Now, I have a few things to say about him first before we get started. I've watched some interviews with him, and I've read some interviews with him where he's talked about his approach to singing because he's known for his really wide range and his ability to sing effectively all over the voice. And it's interesting to me because one of the biggest things he's always said is that I started out with voice lessons when I was younger and I didn't like what they were making me do. I like the way my voice sounds without the training, so I've always gone on my own. So there are some things to be said about this. First off, I want to dispel the myth that vocal training causes you or forces you to sing in a specific way. It doesn't. Voice training, if it's done well, is mostly designed to help you understand better how to efficiently use your voice. And I use that term efficiency a lot. What I mean by efficiency is the notion that your voice is operating at its optimal level with a good balance of sound, breath support, flow of air, lack of tension, freedom of the sound, that kind of thing. That's what we talk about when we sing efficiently or optimally or whatever term you want to use. It doesn't necessarily matter the sound that's produced. However, there are certain sounds that you can create that can only be created by you doing destructive things with your voice. So one thing that I do take issue with about Daniel and his approach is that he seems to have this notion that voice training forces your voice into a certain method or a certain way of singing, and that's not true. If you have a good voice teacher, they're going to help you take your own voice and make it better, and they're not going to try to shape it in a specific direction or send you down a certain path or turn you into a certain sound. Your voice is your only voice, and as I've said in my other videos before, you're the only you that you have, and you're the only you this world has. So as a result, you can't really expect someone to sound like someone that they aren't. Basically, where I'm going with this is that Daniel has done an amazing job of making it work on his own. I do believe that he's experienced some vocal decay over the last few years, and I know that he had the major hospital incident where he was bedridden from the flesh-eating bacteria or whatever it was that he had. It sounds crazy to me. I do think that he's had a vocal decline, and there are a few pieces of evidence that lend to this. First off, Ragnar Solberg was doing a lot of his high vocals on their recent tour. He's not with the band anymore, but when he was touring with them, he was doing a lot of the higher vocals, and Daniel wasn't. For example, on Beyond the Pale, when they do that song, Ragnar would sing the high parts, and Daniel wouldn't. His range has definitely diminished on the top end. I do believe that he still sings some of his top end stuff pretty well, but it's definitely diminished down quite a bit. And I do believe that that's a result of a combination of factors. It could be the surgery that he has had some long-term effect on his voice, but in all likelihood, it's probably just that whole typical rock singer running the voice into the ground over time and age is catching up to him kind of deal. And that happens a lot, as I've explained very in-depth throughout several of my other videos. So I don't want to go into too much of that here. I really kind of just want to get the video going and we can just kind of go from there. This is from the B DVD production, and this is from 2005, I believe it was, when that album was released. I want to pick videos from singers where I feel like it demonstrates them at their vocal peak, and I think that this is a pretty good example of him being at pretty close to his vocal peak. This video, I think, has some post-production on it because I know that there's one part where he has a jacket that he's trying to remove that he has a lot of trouble taking off. And if I remember correctly, there was an interview where he actually stated like some of the vocals had to be piped in from, after the video was made because he couldn't get the jacket off, so he couldn't sing. So you'll see elements of that. So I don't know exactly how much of this is in post-production, done in post-production, and which of this is all live, but either way, even in the sound that you hear, there's some good vocal analysis that can be done from it. So without further ado, let's get started. Here we go. Iter Impius. Of course, he's got the little water thing. I don't remember what the reasoning was for having that little pool in the middle of the stage. There was some sort of like Pain of Salvation-esque reason for it. So let's go ahead and go here, and I'll stop it when I have a couple of major things that I want to say about what he's doing.
Expecting to find all that I saw.
I'm going to go ahead and stop it here. So at the very beginning, you hear, I woke up today. You hear this, and I've gone into this with Devin Townsend. If you watch my Devin Townsend video, that's an example of a glottal onset. You're going to find a lot of that in pop singers, and I say pop music as if, you know, this is a pop song. It's not. But when I say pop singers, I mean people that aren't singing in the classical kind of technique, classical method. You're going to hear a lot of this glottal stuff. And in case you haven't seen one of my videos before, a glottal onset is where you have subglottal pressure, you have air build up underneath the folds, and it all kind of pushes out all at once because of the approach that you take to starting a word. Typically, you run into these types of things when you sing or say words that begin with vowels. So there's a bad glottal onset here. It's just damaging over the long term. Putting all that pressure on the folds over and over again can lead to nodules in the long term. Another thing to point out is that he's using the covered or the aspirate sound where he's putting all the air through the sound like that. And it's stylistic, and that's one thing about Daniel that I want to point out is that he's extremely versatile. He can make a lot of different vocal sounds, and he can move in and out of different registers and different types of singing pretty effortlessly and with pretty great efficacy. So that's one of his strengths. I can absolutely say that he's singing with the aspirate covered sound by choice, not because he's doing it as a habit or by default. He's doing it because he's choosing to. Doesn't mean that it's not damaging in the long term, but he's choosing to do it, and he knows when not to do it or when he doesn't want to do it, which is the most important thing to me. So here we go.
Climb the mountains of the life I bought. Finally, I'm at the top.
So if you listen to this iteration of that same melodic phrase, he doesn't have the air over the sound. Finally, I'm at the top. He's got it back on the voice now. He took the air out of it. So what he's doing, he's demonstrating he has the ability to move into a covered sound and out of a covered sound. So I know for sure that it's not some habit thing like John Mayer does.
Every hierarchy, unfortunately, there is no one left but me.
Generally, it's a very, very good reading, a good performance of that. I feel like he had a pretty even sound throughout it. It was nice in his range. Pretty well done.
I woke up today to a world that's ground to dust, dirt and stone. I'm the king upon this withering throne.
So again, he's got the onset thing going on, and I honestly would not be surprised if this continuous glottal thing, and I don't want to stop every time he does it because I'd be stopping the video throughout the whole, over and over throughout this whole thing. I honestly think that emphasis on the onsets has probably caused him some vocal decay, because doing it over and over and over again for years will cause damage. I was telling one of my voice students, hey Jonathan, what's up, man? I was telling one of my voice students just earlier today that doing it a couple of times, maybe once or twice, even a day, isn't going to kill you. But if you're recording and you're doing it over and over again, or you're singing a performance where you do it 50 times in one night throughout the course of a show, that will catch up to you and do damage. And the most common thing that happens is the bottom of the folds get nodules on them. So you get that, like, you get this raised sort of tough, hard spot on, almost like a callus. Those usually either have to be laser removed, or sometimes, if they're not too bad with voice therapy, they can get smaller and go away, but it's very rare for that to happen. Most of the time you have to remove them with surgery, and the success rate on the surgery is not that great. You can look up the statistics yourself. They're not very good. All right, let's go.
I ruled every forest, every mountain, every sea. Now there but ruins left to rule for me. And you see, it beckons me.
Now here, I don't know if he's making this scrunch up of the face because he's trying to be expressive, but hopefully this is not the amount of tension he's using when he vocalizes, because tensing up the cheeks and tensing up the forehead, that kind of thing, is generally a bad idea. You want to sing without tension. I reviewed this video before, and maybe I don't remember exactly where we get to it, but maybe we'll see it soon, where you're going to see this kind of like veiny stuff in his neck happening too, which makes me think that he's singing with a lot of neck tension, but we'll see when we get there.
Life turned its back on us. How could you just agree?
Okay, I'm going to stop it here. I promise I'm going to let you guys just hear this straight through in more bigger bursts, but I wanted to point out, how could you just agree? That was a mix voice. What you heard him do, let me go back a little bit.
Back on us.
Right here.
How could you just agree?
That is a mixed voice. So when people talk about a vocal mix, what they're talking about is a space between the higher register, your falsetto register, and the modal register, which is the chest voice. There's a space that we call the vocal mix. That was an example of the vocal mix. That wasn't reinforced falsetto. It wasn't falsetto because he actually had a little bit of chest voice on it. He had the support of the chest voice underneath it. But he had the range and the tone of the head voice. So that is a vocal mix. If you want an example of it, there you go. He has great control of his head voice as well. So when he went to a world, and I don't have that range that he's got. He's a lyric baritone, kind of in the higher range. I'm more of a bass baritone, so I'm probably not going to sound as good as he does when he sings it. But when you could hear there where he went at, I woke up today, and that was all in his head voice, and then he sung to a world, kind of in this spot that sounded chestier. That's a really good example of him having a lot of fluidity up and down his range and being able to move in and out of his head voice at will. That's a sign of a very strong, well-coordinated singer. So even if he hasn't had any vocal training, he's done a good job of navigating these areas of the changes in his voice. The passaggio, or the point where you change from register to register, is notoriously one of the most difficult points for the voice to navigate, especially in that mid voice for men, like around the C, D, E flat, E, F range. Really hard for men typically to navigate. So he's doing a really good job of that here. Really nice.
Useless brick upon the shore, the morning after the storm, they swept the bridge away, relentless tide, no anger, just this relentless time that goes on.
So yeah, that was all pretty exquisite in terms of showing an extremely well coordinated head to chest voice navigation. I think that he did a great job moving in and out of his head voice there. There's not a whole lot that I could critique from the perspective of him singing in this style. Now, if this were a classical piece, he probably wouldn't even sing it in that method, but for what he's trying to do, I feel like he did that about as healthily and about as fluidly as anyone could expect. So I'd say kudos to Daniel Gildenlöw for this particular part. He did an extremely good job there. Yeah, there it was. Let me see if I can go back and pause it. Okay, yeah, there we go. So if you look, that right there, you shouldn't see that when you sing. And I don't know if it's a byproduct of him tilting his neck back. I don't know. But you shouldn't see that much muscle engagement when you sing. Now, this is a good opportunity for me to talk about posture, because you want to have a vertical alignment from your head basically straight down. You don't want there to be too many bends and crimps in the sound. And there's an analogy that I like to use briefly, where if you think about a water hose, if you crimp up a water hose, the water stops flowing. And if the water hose is straight, the water flows straight through. The air is similar. You want to keep the mechanism kind of aligned so you don't have crimps in the hose that prevent it from the air moving fluidly and efficiently. So I think that him putting his neck back like this, it's definitely engaging stuff down here that makes it harder to phonate. So I don't know if that like, of all this veiny stuff is a result of his singing method or from the way that he's positioned his neck. But either way, it's probably not too great for you. So you can see that, go away. So you can see here when his head is more straight, that veiny stuff isn't quite as protruding as as it is when his neck is tilted back. So the implication is that maybe it was his neck positioning that was causing that tension. I can only guess. I'm not sure, but that's what I would probably guesstimate as it being. So there we heard something kind of subtle. He ran out of air. If I can kind of show you again, there's going to be a break in between the rattling of bone, or I think that's the word. You'll hear that there's this really quick break in the middle. He ran out of air. So it's an example of him actually not using good breath efficiency to get all the way through the line. Hold on. Right here. Yeah. So this is a great way to show that even some of the best singers, some of the people that just are really good performers, they have technical issues too. So he didn't have good breath support. Now it could be from his position. Like he's, one of the big things that I'm seeing from this video is like really bad posture. He's bent way down. That closes all that stuff up. So that could have something to do with the reason that his breath wasn't as efficient. He couldn't carry the phrase all the way through without breathing. That could have something to do with it. I'm not sure, but I would give an educated guess and say that probably does have something to do with it. Another thing is on the word "on this withering throne," I think it is. He goes on. If you go back and listen to it, it has this kind of sound. What he's doing there is he's putting the resonance in his nose. And while people do it, like you hear it a lot in pop music, the nasal stuff isn't destructive as much as it's just very unnatural. It's really hard to support, and typically people put things in the nose because it creates a more frontal resonance, and it feels easier to hit higher pitches when the resonance is in the front of the face. So that's a little bit more of a complex subject, but it has to do with placement of the sound in the mouth. It's very similar to how if I go E and then I go E, there's a difference. Like it's still an E vowel, but the first E is very much in the front of the mouth, whereas the second E is very much in the back of the mouth. So placement of the resonance can help things feel easier to hit, make the pitches feel easier to hit. So on there, he does it again. I am on. He does the nasal thing on the word on, and then on own, you can hear the difference. He goes like, I am on my own. So you can hear like own. So you can hear the difference that like the first is very nasally on, and then own is like you're speaking it. So considering that the last time he did this, he was on the word on this withering throne, it makes me wonder if he doesn't have a good baseline of understanding of how to use N consonants along with words. And that's something that we have to strategize as singers. Like if you have a word that consists of a consonant that can resonate like n or you have to figure out exactly how you want to navigate that so it doesn't sound like you're going all the time. You don't want to do that. So on the word on, what a singer would typically do is you would sing on, and you do the from the on first. On, and then you put the N at the end. On, like that. But you wouldn't lean on the on, you wouldn't lean on the N sound. You would make the vowel sound first and then put the N at the end of it. So maybe the issue is that he just hasn't really learned how to navigate that. The reason this is important is because so much of singing correlates to speaking, and that the vowels carry one word to another. And I don't walk around saying the word on like, you don't do that, because it's just not efficient and it doesn't feel natural in the voice. So I would guess that that probably has something to do with his approach to singing that word. He did it again. He did it again. So I honestly think that the issue is that he hasn't really learned how to navigate those phonated consonants. So I would imagine that that's probably more the issue. If he learned to sing on instead of he'd probably do it more efficiently. And that's just the kind of thing that you really only learn by working with someone who kind of knows how that stuff works. So that phrase, I would say, is probably closer to the reinforced falsetto thing. He's got it's all very high larynx, and what I mean by that, when you listen to the sound, it sounds kind of thin. It doesn't sound very full and robust. That's usually a sign of high larynx singing. He's also bent way over, and as I said before, that posture is going to limit sort of the amount of space that the mechanism has to work. There's nothing wrong with the sound of the note. It does sound a little pushed and a little pinched for my tastes. I'm not saying that he did it poorly. It's just when I think of something like that, I want to hear a more pure resonant vowel and not one that's I don't want to hear that. I want to hear something that sounds a little more open. So, I think that a lot of that, like I said, has to do with the way that he's postured, though. One thing that I can't see that really bothers me is I haven't been able to get a good shot of his embouchures or his lip shaping when he sings these high notes, because I'd like to be able to see how wide his lips are, because I would imagine that he probably has some pretty wide embouchures based on how it sounds, and generally you want to keep that stuff more closed. When he sings in his like mid-voice, like speaking range, his embouchures seem pretty darn good, so I would like to be able to see a difference between the two, but for some reason it's just bad luck that the video cuts out on a lot of that stuff. So on the word rust, I can see rah, rah, rah. He really widened it out there for sure. And I don't know how he's putting that gravelly sound on his voice. You guys know that's not really my cup of tea. That's not my area of expertise. I don't know how he's doing it. He does that throughout pretty much the rest of his song. So what I can do here is, while I can't tell you how he makes the sound, I can look at the other elements of techniques that I am familiar with and tell you what he's doing. And for on Rust, he definitely had a really wide embouchure, and again, that just creates face tension. One kind of trend that I'm starting to notice with this harsh stuff is that you kind of have to create tension to make it happen, and I'm wondering if that isn't one of the predominant main reasons that singers that do that typically have trouble in the long term for their careers. So yeah, that was an excellent performance. I want to point out real quick when he goes, when he does that, you can see the embouchure get really wide. Let's see if I can find it here. Right here. So, he goes way out like that, but you don't have to, because you can go, you don't have to go way out wide to make that sound. It's unnecessary, and it just makes things harder on yourself. It's just using too much muscle. But other than that, I think that this is an excellent performance. I think it's one of his best live performances that I've seen, and he has a lot of good live performances that I've seen, but this one I thought was a really good example of him demonstrating all of the versatility of his voice, the range, the different colors of sounds that he can create, the way that he navigates his head voice into his chest voice. I thought that he did a really good job of that. The onset thing is something that, you know, every non-classical singer struggles with. He did a good job of sort of choosing the type of sound that he wants to make without going too far off the deep end. His overall sound is a little pushed. It's a little high larynx. I think that that's a stylistic choice of his, and while it's not the worst thing in the world, it does kind of cut you off from a certain color of sounds, and it also makes you generally have to use more tension when you sing, because when you got the high larynx, when the larynx is lower, the vocal tract has more space. So there's more things that can happen. The air has more room to move. There's more space naturally for everything to reverberate and kind of pick up the robustness of the sound. With the high larynx, you don't have as much space, so to create volume and to make your voice project more, you have to push more. So, you know, that's kind of something that could lead to some problems over time. But I think for the most part, I think that he did a really good job, really solid performance. And I think that if you want to sing rock music, learning how to navigate in and out of that head voice is probably a really, really good idea. Anyway, that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis. I'm going to keep doing more of these, but I do want to kind of shift gears a little bit, maybe do something different next week, just because I don't want you guys to burn out on this. If you have any comments or suggestions on other things I can do in this channel, let me know. I want it to be a little bit of a surprise for you guys every week about what's coming next or what I'm going to do next, but I do want you to have your input. So feel free to comment and let me know what kind of things you want to see. Give me some comments on how I can make this better. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. As I always say, you guys know the YouTube deal. You know, that's what helps me make this channel grow. I do have a Patreon, and I would encourage you to jump in if you want to contribute and help me get a better webcam. I'm saving towards it, and hopefully I'll be there sooner rather than later. If you are interested in something like voice lessons, please reach out to me. I have a few slots available still, so if you want to take voice lessons with me, just let me know. And I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you all have a great day. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care. Bye.